Today there is a mystery to solve. In my search for stuff for the work studio reno, I found this book on OfferUp. Now, this book contains mystery. And today I'm going to show you how I date books that are missing either their copyright page or their publication page. And I have pulled out some books from my library of collections to illustrate how I figure things out. So this book is a combination of 3 stories: Paul and Virginia, Rasselas, and Vicar of Wakefield. It is a beautifully bound book. I bought this because this book cover and the spine of the book are just way too pretty to not grab. So this is a blue cloth bound book with what looks like some gold leaf, and they've used some black ink to highlight all the details here on the floral motifs, the owl, this cute little vase, and all the other bits. The embossing is only on the front page and the spine, and on the back it is just plain. This cover, by the way, feels very smooth, but because of some of the wear and tear on the bottom, we can see that this is in fact, focus camera, focus, that this is in fact cloth. Now, opening this book up, we see the missing portion in question, and you can actually see where there was a chunk supposed to be here. And I haven't looked. Okay, so we have Rasselas and we have the Vicar. So all 3 stories are here, and there's a memoir of the author somewhere in here. I'm wondering if that's what was ripped out to be sold separate by somebody. But this book has some beautiful illustrations on sort of this thicker cardstock feeling paper, and it's better represented over here. Oh yeah, this is loose. This is going to need some book doctoring, which might be another video all on its own. But since we are missing the oh so important page to say when it was published, you have to go off of several things. Now, the seller thought that because Vicar of Wakefield was in here, that this is a book from the 1700s. I'm going to put an image of what a book from the 1700s is. In fact, this specific book, the Vicar of Wakefield, over here. I wasn't going to argue with the person. But I looked at this, and just from being a book collector for basically my whole life, but for antique books a little more than 10 years, I knew that this was late Victorian. Specifically, my best guess was this is the 1880s. Now, I'm going to go on a tiny rabbit trail for a moment. This book style, this embossing style, the craftsmanship type of production with the bookbinding, this belongs to an aesthetic movement called arts and crafts. Normally when we talk about arts and crafts, we are thinking the house style, but the arts and crafts ran from 1880s to about 1910, I think it is. And it was all about being the anti-industrial machine. You know, stop having the easy manufacturing, everything the same, bring back some styling and craftsmanship, artisanship to everyday objects like a book, cloth, metal objects, etc. So to further reinforce my estimate, I've pulled out some books. So let's start with something that I believe is older. Now, I know the entire internet is going to freak out because this book is green, but as far as I can tell, this is not arsenic green. Nevertheless, I will be washing my hands after handling it. So, we have The Royal Path of Life Illustrated. This is a book from the 1870s. I think the exact date is either 73 or 78. We see with the embossing that you have some gold highlighting here, and depending on how I move it in the light, you see the details. But this is not the same detailing that we see here with the black and the blue. We have this beautiful border motif on the front and the back. We see that with the styling of the letters on the spine here, that they are starting to get a little bit fancy. We have a really pretty border up here at the top and at the bottom with some very interesting choices to notate the publisher. Now, this is also a cloth-bound book, and right by my index finger here, you can see where the threads are starting to fray from book wear. At one point, this book had some very pretty marbling painted on it, or just dipped, and it looks tired, to be honest. We do have illustrations in this book, separated by that classic tissue paper that we saw in the earlier one. And this is a heavy book. I'm going to set it down for a moment. Yeah, so we see 1876 here as the date, and so forth. The book binding is pretty thick, but as far as I can tell, this method and this method are pretty similar. It's just so I'm going to show it like this. This is almost flat, and this could be associated with shelfware, but at one point this was probably shoved down a little more, and we had a nice ridge like what we see here on this book. Okay, I'm going to pause, wash my hands, and set this off to the side, and I'm going to grab some more modern books for comparison. Be back in a bit. All right, hands are nice and clean and dried. So let's take a look at some books that I'm predicting are younger than this book. So this is a book from 1909, the Best of the World's Classic, Henry Cabot Lodge, editor-in-chief. And just from first glance, this is way more modestly embossed than this book. We have mostly lettering on the front cover with a single motif in the middle, but the spine of the book is very embellished. It is very pretty. We have this flower, I want to say flower and leaf motif at the top, then some lettering, and then the motif is continued all the way down to the bottom where we have the publisher's initials. There's no decoration on the back. And one thing that I found interesting is that the font in this book feels a little bit larger than the font in this book. So let me hold these both up closer to the camera. So this book from 1909 feels just a teeny bit bigger, and it could be the fact that the font is a little more bolder than the font in this mystery date book. So this is like font 11, and this is like font 12 or so. So this is 1909. Now let's look at a book from the 19-teens. Now this book is deceiving. It starts off looking like a leather bound. This is a Swedish dictionary book, by the way. If you can read everything, kudos to you, because I'm still learning. So this book is interesting. Only the top portion of the spine here, so the portion where you're wrapping for the spine to attach certain things to the main cover and such, this is leather. I have handled enough leather books and have had enough I've had enough leather books in my library to know this is real leather. But the rest of the cover is this interesting paper design. I think this is accomplished by doing a paint dip for pages. And looking at the shelfware, you can see that, yes, this is indeed paper. It is getting my hand too far out. This is absolutely paper. This is a lot different when comparing it to some of these other books that have wear and tear on the bottom, and you can actually see fabric fibers. Like with many a dictionary book, this is dyed painted red on the edges. The side that was facing the sun at the last house this was in kind of made it a little bit old and tired. But like with some of these other books, the font styling is drastically different, and this could just be the fact that this is not a British English publication standard. This could just be the Swedish standard, and so forth. So this is about 1913, 1914. Now let's take a look at a book from the 1920s. Now this is in French. No, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. This book is very, very simplified. In fact, this is more simplified than the green 1870s book. We do have some pretty embellishment on the front cover, where we have corresponding motifs for each corner. So we've got like some person here on these two corners, and then a rooster on these two corners with some kind of motif in the middle. I don't know if that's from the publisher or just something pretty. And then on the spine of the book, it is mostly letters. So this is about, let's see, this book is, I believe, 23. Yeah, copyright 1923. And also another way for dating books is, if you have a copyright, you can almost guarantee that it is after 1900, because we didn't have really good standardizations with copyright law until closer to the 1920s and teens. Someday I will do a whole essay video on that. So to line this up based on my prediction, this is older than this, which is older than this and this, but younger than this. With the physical aesthetics compared, let's hop on to Google and see if my first guess is correct. See you in the digital world. So there are a few ways we can date this book, starting with the basic internet search. I am going to be Googling Vicar of Wakefield, as this is one of the stories in the book that's a little bit better written on, and the story that is quoted by the person who sold this book. So, looking up the basics on the Vicar of Wakefield, the author lived from 1728 to 1774. The book was written from 1761 to 1762 and was published in 1766. Now, over here on the right-hand side is the first edition, bound in calfskin with the title page. Now let's get this big. Definitely not the book that I was holding. So let's read a little more. It was one of the most popular and widely read 18th century novels among the Victorians. Aha! Now, unfortunately, the Victorian period is really, really large. But this tells us when it was written and when it was published, and at what point it became popular. Now, looking at the other stuff on the side, we see that this was a 170-page book. We see the first publisher, we see the first illustrator, at least notably. We see the country it was published in, language, genre, all those things. Now, let's go look up the publisher that is on my edition of the book. Now, on the end, we have Lavelle. And on that first page that you would have seen when I was showing off the illustrations, we have John Wortel Lavelle, New York, number 24 Bond Street. Now, typing his name into Google, we are going to be getting this on him. So there is the gentleman who is the publisher. He lived from 1851 to 1923. So that covers the arts and crafts movement that I think this book belongs to. Okay, so he was born in Montreal. His father was an Irish publisher who immigrated. We can skip the stuff about his life. Okay, business career. In 1876, John, his father, and G. Mercer Adams formed the publishing firm of Lovell, Adam and Company. This venture was followed by various other partnerships and firms, often involving his brother Frank. The John W. Lavelle Company was established in 1881, located in New York City. It published a wide variety of books, taking advantage of the lack of international copyright laws to reprint popular titles of the day, such as novels by Charles Dickens, Jules Verne, etc. The Lavelles reprinted many series for children, such as the works of Thomas Mayne Reid, Thomas Brown books, and so forth. Now, this guy was part of a big organization, and we get a good date. But considering the name printed on the book as his full name, we need to find out when this company was in action. So looking up the publisher, we have John Lavelle, and we have some links from the Library of Congress to look up. So let me zoom this in so everybody can see better. So established 1882, succeeded in 1890 by the United States Book Company. So we're able to figure out two things. One, we know when this could not have been published under his name, because by 1890 the company names changed. Words are hard. Sorry about that. So we know that this is almost guaranteed to be the 1880s at a certain point. We also know that we have a second source confirming that they are in New York City. So if I were to say, type in Google the location, and I'm doing this blind, I've not done this ahead of time like with his name. Okay. New York, no, 24 Bond Street. So we know the location, but can we find anything on the history? This feels like it's going to be the most rabbit hole trail possible. But sometimes when we look these up, we can see different records. Unfortunately, I think this would take too many hours to go through. So let's then click on the Library of Congress links they have for him. Okay. So they have some publications under this copyright and some reprints, possibly. Okay. So we know when they were there. So let's now do a Google search for books published in 1980s. Alright. I was hoping... Okay, let's do this a different way. Okay. You just want to be able to look and see the covers. Okay, so we have a cover of a little bit similar to ours, not as embellished. We have a Shakespeare edition, kind of a combination of what I showed from the 1870 book and such. We have 1886, and it all depends on the amount of money the publishers had. So we have Little Tom's Cabin edition that is highly stylized. We have a late 1870s book, or early 1873 book that has a lot of geometric looking styles. Tennyson. We're seeing some of the Art Nouveau scene here, and so forth. I was hoping to find the etiquette book from the 1880s. I will look and see if I can capture a photo from somewhere. But we see that the publications of this era fit for the date. Now, unfortunately, all of the books that this website has listed for the Lavelle Company for publishing, it is not the full list. I did take a peek at that, and unfortunately, unless there's more information, it's still a guess. But we got within a decade of when this book would be published, so I feel like that is a really successful thing. So hopefully these are some tips and tricks that you can use if you ever find a pretty book that doesn't have its copyright page, or a book where the publisher never bothered, because that was a thing before copyright law became an international thing. So hopefully you enjoyed seeing the goodies, learning these tips. I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.